I never imagined that the woman who once called me dad would shout, "I'm not your slave," the moment I asked her for help after my surgery, a surgery I paid for myself. That moment shattered everything I believed about family, trust, and loyalty. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. My name is James Thompson. I'm 67 years old, a man who has spent decades building a steady life, providing for my family, and expecting, at the very least, respect in return. Up until 6 months ago, that seemed like a safe assumption, one I thought was indisputable. But reality has a way of hitting you when you're at your most vulnerable. It was late February 2024 when I underwent a complicated hernia repair surgery. I was careful to make every payment up front, over $2,500 out of pocket, thanks to some savings I had cautiously set aside. I knew the road to recovery wouldn't be easy, and as any father would expect, I anticipated at least some support from my children. After all, my health wasn't just my concern, it was theirs too. But when I called my daughter Emily Johnson, the one who seemed closest, that expectation was met with an icy shock. "I'm not your slave," she screamed over the phone. The words were sharp, brutal, and utterly unexpected. For a moment, I just sat there, the receiver pressed against my ear, feeling a stranger on the other end. I replayed the conversation in my head, trying to piece together what had led to such a fracture. I wasn't naive. I'd heard murmurs of disrespect and distant coldness before, but a direct rejection like that, from my own daughter, it was a different kind of betrayal. You see, before that day, I'd always been seen as the firm patriarch of the family, someone who managed the finances, who held everyone together. Yet, behind closed doors and whispered conversations, I was being undermined, dismissed, and made vulnerable. I wasn't about to let that slide. But anger wasn't the first response, it was calculation. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that emotions cloud judgment. At 67, I wasn't some reckless man. I was a strategist, someone who knew the value of patience and planning. The game had changed. I just needed to learn the new rules. That night, I pulled out old financial records, bank statements, and text messages. At first glance, nothing screamed betrayal, but a few anomalies stood out. A transfer here, a payment diverted there. Suddenly, it wasn't just about refusal to help, it was about something far darker. I realized the neglect was a symptom of a larger, deliberate plot against me. My first significant discovery was damning. A series of withdrawals from a joint account with Emily, funds that were meant to cover medical expenses, had been rerouted without my consent. This wasn't carelessness or forgetfulness. It was theft cloaked in family ties. With this painful clarity, I made my first strategic decision. I would not confront them immediately. Instead, I would observe, gather, and outmaneuver. I arranged a careful meeting with my longtime attorney, Jacob Smith, on March 10th. Our discussion was methodical, planning how to monitor transactions and communications without raising alarms. I couldn't rely on trust anymore, only on evidence and measured moves. Before hanging up, Jacob warned, "James, be cautious. Family betrayals often cut deepest. But with facts on your side, you'll regain control." That was my new mission. Regain control. And the first move was subtle but firm. I changed all my account passwords that very night and set up alerts for any unusual activity. I also hired a discreet private investigator to monitor behaviors and gather additional evidence. Little did I know, that decision would unravel secrets that ran deeper and darker than simple financial misconduct. It would expose fractures, alliances, and motives I never could have predicted. But that's for the next chapter. For now, I'm just a man who refused to be a victim. Someone who, once underestimated and dismissed, was quietly preparing to reclaim his place, piece by piece. And as you hear this, remember, betrayal doesn't always come violently. Sometimes it whispers behind smiles and polite greetings. If you're ready to walk this path with me through the depths of deception and the climb to justice, make sure you stay tuned. There's much more coming. Because this story isn't just about me. It's about what happens when a family's foundations crack, and how one man, no matter his age, can turn the tide back in his favor. Until next time, I'm James Thompson, and this is just the beginning. In the days that followed my initial shock, I became more than just a patient recovering from surgery. I transformed into an investigator quietly unraveling a web I had been blind to for years. The very people I trusted, the ones I believed would stand by me without hesitation, showed signs of deception I had overlooked. This was not happenstance nor a mere lapse in care. It was a calculated dance of betrayal, choreographed behind my back. My daughter Emily's harsh refusal was just the surface. Going through my old financial documents with renewed scrutiny, I began to notice irregularities that previously seemed insignificant. Little withdrawals here, unexplained transfers there, subtle shifts in my savings that, combined, were hard to ignore. They weren't accidental, and they weren't just one person's doing. The pattern suggested a deeper conspiracy. I started recalling moments that now made sense in a menacing light. Emily avoiding my calls, her husband Michael's evasive explanations about financial difficulties, even my son Robert's unusually frequent visits to the bank without my presence. My family, it seemed, had quietly organized against me. Piecing it all together was like assembling a complex puzzle. The quiet quarrels ignored during holiday dinners, the unexplained absence during my recovery demands, the whispered conversations that suddenly went silent when I entered the room, all part of a picture I hadn't wanted to see. To move forward, I knew reliance on memory wasn't enough. Solid evidence was imperative. Consulting again with Jacob Smith, the lawyer who had been a steadfast advisor for more than a decade, I devised a plan. This was no longer about mere suspicion. It was an active investigation. With his guidance, I authorized discreet surveillance on financial accounts and communications linked to Emily, Michael, and Robert. We enlisted a private investigator skilled in family disputes, someone who knew how to tread carefully without provoking alarm. Our timeline stretched back nearly 2 years, searching for the first sign of betrayal. Within weeks, the results poured in, and they were more damning than I had feared. Messages between Michael and Robert revealed discussions about siphoning money from an account earmarked for my medical care and retirement. Emails detailed plans to manipulate my legal documents and shift authority over financial decisions. Emily was aware, playing her part by controlling access and isolating me from my affairs under the guise of helping with recovery. What surprised me most was the scope of their deception. It wasn't just about money. Assets I had accumulated over decades, properties in New Jersey, investments in local businesses, and even rights to a family cabin in Vermont, were being quietly transferred, often without my knowledge, into accounts controlled by the very people betraying me. No wonder Emily responded with such venom. Her anger was a mask for guilt and fear of exposure. The daughter I once trusted had become an architect of my downfall. Despite the emotional sting, I kept my composure. This was a chess game, and losing access to my own life's work was not an option. Every piece of evidence needed cataloging and cross-referencing. I developed a detailed ledger, dates, amounts, names involved, a blueprint for my next moves. With this intelligence, I devised defensive measures. Passwords were changed, accounting institutions notified, and legal holds placed on several assets. The goal wasn't confrontation yet, but fortification. I needed my position unassailable before revealing the full truth. Unexpectedly, during this process, I unearthed a quiet supporter, my sister Helen Brown. She had suspected something was amiss and discreetly offered assistance, sharing her own set of observations and records. Her loyalty was a rare light in a dark period. We coordinated efforts, pooling what we knew to build an impenetrable case. Helen's involvement was a turning point. It rewrote the script of isolation I had thought inevitable. With an ally by my side, I no longer felt outnumbered but strategically reinforced. Resolute and armed with clarity, I readied myself for the inevitable confrontation. But before I moved forward, I had to ensure my house was defensible against all fronts: emotional, financial, and legal. And there, concealed in the shadows of my family's ambition, lurked an even greater betrayal waiting to be uncovered. The stage was set. The players, some familiar, Others, disguised, were revealed. The investigation was no longer merely about uncovering facts. It became a battle for control, survival, and justice. My next step: expose the full extent of their scheming, while maneuvering to reclaim what was rightfully mine. That decision marked the delicate intersection between victimhood and authority. Soon, the web of lies would begin to unravel, thread by tedious thread, to reveal not only a cold financial plot but a family divided by greed and deception of unimaginable depth. With every step, my resolve hardened, and as the story unfolds, the truth's weight will force changes no one saw coming. The more I sifted through the evidence, the clearer it became that this was no isolated act of greed or momentary lapse of loyalty. The betrayal was woven deeply into the fabric of my family's day-to-day existence, condemning years of blind trust and familiarity. Those little signals I had ignored, like Emily's dismissive tone, Michael's vague excuses, and Robert's sudden changes in routine, were in retrospect glaring warnings of a plot that had simmered beneath the surface for far too long. This realization drove me to become a patient observer, transforming my world into a stage where I played the role of the unsuspecting patriarch while secretly gathering pieces to dismantle the facade they maintained so skillfully. Every interaction, every phone call, every casual remark was analyzed for subtle intentions. My home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a theater of conflict where every actor played a double role. The financial documentation revealed more than diverted funds. Account ledgers showed suspicious activity around the time when my surgery was scheduled, and immediately afterward, months when I was weakest, both physically and emotionally. Large sums were transferred without my authorization, and some bills related to my treatment were mysteriously left unpaid, causing debt to accumulate. It was clear they intended to sever my financial independence while preserving the appearance of care. One particular discovery stood out. There was a trust fund I set up nearly 15 years ago, ostensibly for my grandchildren's education, but accessible if I ever fell ill or incapacitated. Over the past year, vast amounts had been quietly withdrawn from that fund into Michael's account. I remembered now a conversation where he dismissed questions about family finances with a casual wave of the hand and an empty promise to sort things out. That phrase now echoed hollowly in my memory, a glaring red flag. To secure my position, I set up a series of electronic monitors on sensitive accounts and requested detailed transaction histories going back 18 months. Jacob Smith, meanwhile, drafted subpoenas and filings to gain access to hidden records of transfers and property deeds. My resolve was steady. This was a war fought with documents and calculated moves, not rash confrontations. Meanwhile, my relationship with Emily continued to deteriorate. After the episode where she exploded at my request for assistance, she maintained a cold distance, avoiding direct communication. It was as if our bond had been rewritten by cold calculation rather than paternal affection. I began receiving indirect reports from neighbors, friends, and others in our social circle of private conversations where she criticized me and plotted family maneuvers. It was a cruel web of duplicity. Robert's role was even more perplexing. Outwardly supportive, he occasionally expressed sympathy, but the deeper investigation painted a different picture. He attended meetings with Michael, where plans were laid to restructure family assets and diminish my trustee authority. His occasional visits to my home were often accompanied by attempts to probe my mental acuity and physical capabilities, attempts to justify removing me as the head of the household under pretense of concern. A particularly harsh realization struck me when I discovered forged documents intended to transfer ownership of some properties to contingencies controlled by Michael and Emily. The forgeries were crude, but timed to appear legitimate in case of sudden incapacity, or worse. This was not just financial exploitation. It was an aggressive takeover, disguised as familial duty. Amidst this swirling storm, Helen Brown, my sister, emerged as a beacon. Quietly unyielding, she shared copies of texts she intercepted between Emily and Michael plotting their moves. Her keen eyes had caught inconsistencies unaware by others. Together we formulated a dossier thick with hard evidence, ready to be leveraged at the right moment. Yet, even with this mounting arsenal, a subtle paranoia crept in. There were moments when my communications felt monitored, when familiar faces seemed to pass coded messages, confirming that the conspiracy was broader than immediate family. It became apparent that extended relations and even some old acquaintances had been roped into the scheme, eager to capitalize on my vulnerability. Prepared for this, I took additional steps, encrypting files, using secure lines for attorney communications, and strictly limiting who had access to sensitive information. These precautions were vital, for the enemy was not just visible, but hidden in plain sight. As the weeks passed, the collection and integration of evidence transitioned from passive gathering to active preparation. Every document was cross-checked, every testimony cataloged, every financial pattern matched against timelines of medical records and familial interactions. The puzzle assembled methodically, its image growing sharper. With the groundwork laid and the battlefield mapped, I identified critical leverage points, accounts, properties, contracts, that became the foundation for a counterstrike. My aim was not revenge fueled by bitterness, but justice achieved through precision and unassailable proof. The most startling revelation, however, came when a trusted family friend, who had until then remained neutral, unexpectedly sided with me. Daniel Harper, a longtime business associate and family confidant, brought to light additional evidence of collusion that implicated yet another family member I had thought loyal. This shift in alliances dramatically altered the landscape. With a new, unexpected ally at my side, the web of deceit began to unravel tenser and faster than before. From here, the strategic path sharpened. Defensive barriers transformed into offensive maneuvers. Legal filings were prepared, and financial holds tightened. Every tactic employed was calculated to strip away the false layers that concealed the truth. Preparation culminated in the realization that the family front was fracturing, that each secret revealed sent shockwaves through their collective power. The investigation's momentum was unstoppable. What was once hidden behind smiles and polite conversation was now exposed, forcing a reckoning that would shake the family foundation to its core. This chapter concluded with a firm resolve. The deeper the betrayal ran, the more meticulous and relentless my response would be. The coming phases required deeper strategy and precision, as the true nature of the treachery fully came into view. The battle for rightful authority was no longer a question of if, but when and how decisively it would be won. By early April, the full scope of the family's deception was becoming alarmingly clear. I had gathered enough evidence to confirm my fears. Emily, Michael, Robert, and even some extended relations had conspired to systematically strip away the assets I had spent decades building. Yet amid this hostile environment, I resolved to act with prudence and discipline, turning the chaos into a calculated campaign for control. Establishing clear lines between allies and adversaries became my priority. Helen Brown remained a steadfast confidant, providing unwavering support and invaluable insight. Her knowledge of family history and internal dynamics helped me better strategize. Meanwhile, Daniel Harper's decision to side with me was a game changer. His business acumen and external perspective added weight to my efforts, transforming isolated pockets of resistance into a coherent front. Conversely, it became painfully evident that Robert Johnson was fully complicit. His feigned concern was merely a tactic to observe and undermine me from within. The family dinners and gatherings I once considered peaceful were now theaters where subtle power plays unfolded. I discreetly distanced myself from those likely to betray, while maintaining surface-level civility to avoid suspicion. The legal front saw intense activity as Jacob Smith drafted a series of documents designed to protect my interests. Trust revocations, estate freezes, and injunction filings were among the tools carefully chosen to secure assets and block unauthorized transactions. Simultaneously, forensic accountants were appointed to audit every financial move related to my accounts over the last 5 years. The goal was to expose not just the thefts, but the patterns of fraud perpetrated by the very people assigned to safeguard my well-being. Every day revealed new complexities. Some family members had already sold properties to outsiders, complicating reclamation efforts. Others held power of attorney documents with questionable validity. Jacob and I had to tread carefully, balancing aggressive legal tactics with the risk of fracturing remaining relationships irreparably. Documenting evidence became a meticulously organized affair. I created physical binders and encrypted digital folders cataloging emails, bank statements, voice recordings, and eyewitness accounts. Each file was cross-referenced by date and context, allowing me to construct a timeline narrative powerful enough to sway any legal or financial institution. I was no longer a passive victim. I had become the architect of my defense. During this time, I also engaged financial advisors to reassess my portfolio. We moved numerous accounts to separate institutions, implemented additional security protocols, and froze all discretionary payments crediting to family members. This financial quarantine was essential. It slowed the bleeding caused by unauthorized withdrawals and prevented further access to liquid assets. Amid these intense preparations, a surprising discovery emerged. Confidential correspondence accidentally shared by one of Emily's close friends revealed that not only was the betrayal within the immediate family, but certain extended relations had conspired to exploit my condition and hasten asset division with greed-driven urgency. This revelation expanded the battlefield significantly. Faced with these tangled alliances, I restructured my network of allies. Helen and Daniel became my primary advisors and liaison points. Together, they helped identify trustworthy external professionals, accountants, legal experts, and even discreet investigators, with the skills and discretion needed to navigate this delicate landscape. Throughout, I maintained a facade of calm and control. The people attacking me underestimated one critical factor: my ability to remain composed under pressure. I knew that emotional outbursts would only grant them ammunition. So every interaction I had with Emily or Robert was measured, carefully avoiding direct confrontation, but always gathering subtle clues. One afternoon, during a quiet meeting with Jacob, we devised a multi-layered approach combining legal action with financial maneuvers. The plan included filing a petition for conservatorship on grounds of impaired decision-making capacity. Not because I was weak, but because certain family members were manipulating perceptions of my health to gain control. We aimed to wrest power back through the courts, supported by the mountain of evidence I had amassed. Moreover, we discussed the importance of involving neutral third parties, trusted mediators who could offer oversight and prevent further unilateral actions by those abusing their positions. This strategy was critical. Transparency under pressure would expose their duplicity publicly and legally, preventing easy cover-ups. As April faded into May, preparations accelerated. Every signature, every official request, every strategic move was timed with precision to prevent countermeasures. I became a conductor orchestrating the defense of everything I had built. Unexpectedly, an old friend of the family, Margaret Lewis, reached out. Though not previously active in family affairs, she offered records indicating she had noticed unusual behavior by Emily and Michael over time. Including these new findings fortified my position further and added credibility to the unfolding narrative. By the end of May, with dossiers complete, evidence cataloged, and legal actions filed, I felt a renewed sense of control. The moment to transition from defensive posturing to active reclamation approached. Yet the day had not yet fully arrived. Patience remained the cornerstone of my strategy. Every move had to be justified, undeniable, and precise. The goal was to dismantle the carefully constructed betrayal without causing irreversible damage to everything else. Determining true allies from false was among the most delicate tasks. Beneath the surface, loyalty sometimes lurked self-interest and old grievances. But for now, Helen, Daniel, Jacob, and Margaret formed the nucleus of a trusted support system anchored by shared commitment to justice. Money, paper, and law were my weapons. Calculation was my shield. This phase of the operation was about building a fortress around what remained mine. And once fortified, I would launch the countermeasure designed not only to restore order, but to change the family's entire power dynamic. The path ahead was still fraught with risk and uncertainty, but I no longer faced it alone or unarmed. Every day brought new information, new preparations, and renewed decisiveness. The battle was far from over, but with a solid foundation underfoot, victory was now within reach. With June approaching, the delicate architecture of my defense was nearing completion. Every piece of incriminating data, every forged signature, every clandestine transfer was now securely documented and strategically poised for judicial review. My legal team, led by Jacob Smith, was building an ironclad case, one designed not only to reclaim my assets, but to dismantle the malign influence eroding my family from within. The next step was systematic documentation and consolidation. I personally oversaw the collation of evidence, creating exhaustive binders for court submission. Each financial audit report was paired with corresponding email threads, phone records, and eyewitness testimonies. The interlocking narrative proved beyond reasonable doubt that Emily, Michael, and Robert orchestrated a deliberate scheme to strip me of control during my vulnerable recovery period. These binders were more than just paper. They represented years of misplaced trust and broken bonds. I meticulously reviewed each detail, calculating the legal weight of every document. My steadfast composure, hard-earned through this ordeal, was critical in managing the overwhelming emotions this brought to the fore. Beyond the raw evidence, our strategy incorporated securing expert endorsements. Forensics accountants, handwriting analysts, digital investigators, all were enlisted to corroborate findings. Their impartial reports fortified our position, transforming suspicion into undeniable proof. Concurrently, I refined my financial defenses. We implemented a sweeping restructure of my holdings, relocating substantial assets to accounts secured with multi-tier authentication and accessible only to myself and trusted advisors. Automatically triggered alerts monitored any unauthorized activity or attempted changes, effectively locking out my detractors. Recognizing the psychological warfare at play, I also prepared for the emotional impact these moves would have within the family. The legal petitions, especially the conservatorship filings, would provoke backlash and possibly deepen divisions. But that was a necessary cost in pursuing justice. Through it all, my communications with Helen and Daniel remained constant. Their counsel balanced pragmatism with loyalty, ensuring I didn't veer into reckless territory. Margaret Lewis's intermittent contributions continued to shed light on the broader conspiracy, especially regarding extended family complicity, which added layers to our courtroom strategy. I remain composed during family encounters, even as I study subtle shifts in their behavior. Emily's glances carry veiled hostility. Michael's once cocky demeanor has grown increasingly tense. Robert, ever the chameleon, oscillates between feigned concern and barely concealed resentment. Every interaction is an opportunity, providing clues and affirming my control. One pivotal decision during this period was securing digital evidence that Emily tried to erase. Working closely with cybersecurity specialists, we recovered deleted texts and documents from her devices, revealing conversations where she discusses immediate liquidation plans for shared properties. We recorded timestamps, IP data, and geolocation details, all reinforcing the pattern of illicit actions. This digital breakthrough also uncovered an alliance I hadn't anticipated. Emily was working in concert with a former financial advisor who had ceased professional relations with me years earlier under contentious circumstances. The extent of their collusion exposed additional breaches of fiduciary duty and legal violations. As we prepared to transition from defense to offense, Jacob drafted a comprehensive action plan targeting key vulnerabilities in the opposition's scheme. This involved requesting injunctions to freeze assets, motions to remove Emily and Michael from any fiduciary roles, and petitions to invalidate fraudulent documents. Simultaneously, psychological preparation became essential. I resisted the temptation to confront them prematurely, knowing that tactical patience would yield greater leverage. Each summon letter, each court filing, was calculated to maximize impact with minimal exposure. My focus extended beyond immediate legal skirmishes. Foreseeing a potential prolonged battle, I engaged negotiators experienced in family litigation to explore avenues for settlement. Settlements contingent on full accountability and restitution. Though I entered these discussions prepared for battle, I understood the value of ending conflict pragmatically if justice could be secured. By late June, the groundwork was solid. I had transformed from an isolated target into the epicenter of a well-organized campaign. My carefully crafted network was ready to support decisive steps. At a discreet meeting with Jacob and Helen, the conversation turned to timing. We analyzed court calendars, anticipated responses, and calculated optimal moments for filing motions and revealing evidence. The sun was setting on their reign of deception, and dawn was rising on renewed order. No detail was overlooked. Witness affidavits were rehearsed, forensic experts prepped for deposition, and financial trail meticulously mapped. Virtual backups safeguarded every asset of importance, preserving my right to recover damages. Throughout this, I maintained minimal direct contact with Emily and her cohort, limiting exposure to provocations or attempts to derail our progress. The masterstroke lay in controlling the narrative, letting facts speak louder than words, and exposing misconduct methodically. The transformation from wounded father to resolute strategist was complete. Where once I was sidelined by injury and betrayal, I now commanded the initiative with unwavering resolve. As July approached, I prepared for intensifying efforts to regain what was wrongfully taken. The legal halls awaited the culmination of my preparation. In this phase, the emphasis was on organizing not just for confrontation, but for victory. And so, the final design of the counterattack was ready, precise, deliberate, and unyielding. The family fabric, once frayed by secrecy and greed, was unraveling under the weight of truth. Justice was imminent, and with every documented step I moved closer to reclaiming control and restoring dignity. The morning of July 15th felt like stepping onto a battlefield, a courtroom instead of a war zone, but a war nonetheless. I arrived early, prepared not only with binders full of evidence, but with a careful resolve that had been forged over months of patient labor. No longer the vulnerable elder ignored and dismissed, I was a force to be reckoned with. Our first move was to file a comprehensive injunction, immediately freezing assets under dispute. The judge, after hearing preliminary motions, granted our request based on the overwhelming documentation of irregular financial activity and forged signatures. That moment, though procedural, signaled a seismic shift in power. Emily's reaction was swift and incendiary. I learned through my attorney that she had hired an aggressive legal team intent on painting me as incapable and resistant to familial cooperation. Falsified accusations flew, claims of mental decline and incapacitation, aimed at undermining my credibility. I met these charges with cold, factual rebuttals buttressed by medical records and cognitive assessments proving my sharpness and sound judgment. Michael and Robert's strategy revolved around disruption and intimidation, attempts to make judges doubt my capacity and to persuade mutual acquaintances to discredit me socially. They underestimated my preparedness, however. I had anticipated their moves, creating contingency plans well before opening the legal front. Meanwhile, Helen and Daniel kept turning the gears behind the scenes. Helen cultivated a network of family friends and professionals who stood as character witnesses attesting to my competence and fair-heartedness, while Daniel leveraged his investigative contacts to secure additional proof of impropriety on the opposing side. One of the most effective weapons at our disposal was a series of recorded conversations between Michael and a former advisor discussing how to accelerate asset seizures during my recovery window. This, combined with the data recovered texts Emily had tried to delete, exposed a coordinated malicious scheme forming a tight noose around my independence. Gradually, public opinion swayed as word spread about the court proceedings. Neighbors who had been on the fence began expressing sympathy, and even some family friends withdrew quiet support from Emily and Michael. Social capital slipped through their fingers, while my stature as a wronged but resolute patriarch rose. In early August, the legal pressure mounted with subpoenas demanding full disclosure of accounts, contracts, and communications. Their attempts to stall and obfuscate backfired as compliance revealed deeper layers of mismanagement and unauthorized dealings. Robert's desperate attempts to mediate failed spectacularly after multiple inconsistencies in his statements surfaced. His duplicity was laid bare, further isolating him. I recall a tense meeting where he tried to plead for leniency. His words rang hollow against the undeniable facts. The financial freeze proved invaluable. It stopped ongoing withdrawals and halted property transfers, ensuring I retained control over key holdings. I implemented further safeguards by transferring the most vulnerable assets into trusts overseen by independent trustees loyal solely to me. Despite all this, I remained measured. Frustration gnawed at me when I saw Emily's hardened expressions and Michael's defiance, but I refused impulsive retaliation. My victory would come through strategy, not anger. One pivotal development occurred mid-August when a surprise witness came forward. A former employee of the family accountant who revealed forged reports and irregular approvals authorized by Emily and Michael. This addition pierced assumed protection, steadily eroding their defense. The court hearings became arenas where truth battled deception. Each day unveiled new disclosures, tightening the noose and exposing fractures within their alliance. I could sense cracks beginning to form as mistrust spread among the conspirators. Social dynamics also shifted. Family members who had remained silent traded careful glances, hesitant to choose sides openly. I treated these moments as opportunities to rebuild bridges where possible, offering measured gestures to neutral relatives without compromising my position. Physically, I grew stronger. Recovering from surgery faster than anyone expected, I regained mobility and vigor. This physical renewal bolstered my mental fortitude, reinforcing that age and illness were weapons my adversaries tried to wield against me, but ultimately failed to exploit. By September, the momentum heavily favored me. The injunctions remained intact, legal filings piled up against the accused, and public support quietly rallied. I had shifted from defense to offense, now actively pursuing restitution and formal removals from fiduciary roles. Strategically timed disclosures to their legal teams pressured Emily and Michael into more conciliatory negotiations. But I remained cautious. Settlements required full restitution and admissions. Anything less was unacceptable. A final maneuver came in the form of a court-sanctioned mediation session, where all parties were compelled to present comprehensive statements. The atmosphere was tense, the air thick with unspoken consequences. Yet, armed with irrefutable evidence and the backing of a solid support network, I stood firm. The mediation partially fractured their front. Emily's once solid alliance with Michael weakened as accusations between them surfaced, fueled by mounting legal exposure and growing distrust. Robert, increasingly marginalized, sought refuge but found no sanctuary. Each concession gained was a step towards re-establishing rightful control. The calculated pressure and unrelenting pursuit of truth moved the scales steadily. By the end of September, the court had ordered partial restitution and restrictions on asset management pending final rulings. The legal battle was far from over, but the trajectory was clear. From a man ignored and dismissed, I had emerged a powerful, unyielding figure, one who reclaimed his legacy through patience, evidence, and sheer determination. Though wounds lingered and family ties frayed beyond repair, justice was advancing methodically. As October approached, I prepared to close this chapter with precision, ensuring the hard lessons learned would set a foundation for lasting security and control. The family dynamic was irreversibly altered, the old order toppled by truth and strategy, and at last, I was firmly in charge once more. As the calendar turned to October, the atmosphere surrounding the family had shifted palpably. The quiet tension in previous months had evolved into an unmistakable undercurrent of defeat and despair among those who had once plotted so insidiously. I had become not just a litigant, but the embodiment of deliberate, unshakable authority, unyielding and resolute. The court orders from September had severely curtailed Emily and Michael's influence. Control over their access to family assets was limited, and oversight committees were established to supervise financial activity. Their power waned visibly, But the final act of this prolonged drama was yet to unfold. One revelation during this phase stunned me. Robert, previously a silent participant, had taken secretive steps to salvage his position by attempting to form alliances with third parties outside the immediate family. Documents discovered through surveillance exposed negotiations with several local business partners aimed at leveraging my property holdings for personal gain, without my knowledge or consent. This confirmed not only his betrayal, but suggested a broader network of opportunism. Helen and Daniel took it upon themselves to trace these schemes meticulously. Their combined efforts peeled back layers of deceit, revealing hidden signature forgeries and unauthorized agreements designed to entangle my assets in complex legal knots. These findings were critical in reinforcing our case and provided additional grounds for legal injunctions. At the same time, I became acutely aware of the delicate task of managing familial fractures. While my focus was resolutely on justice and restitution, the collateral damage was unavoidable. I was painfully aware of long-standing relationships irreparably damaged by greed's corrosive touch. Yet sobriety and a commitment to fairness guided my decisions to avoid unnecessary destruction where possible. The mediation process intensified through October and November, accompanied by increasingly heated exchanges between opposing sides. Emily's composure cracked amid mounting pressure, revealing desperation in whispered phone calls and guarded meetings overheard by our investigators. Michael retreated further into self-defensive postures, his defiance growing thin as trust within their circle eroded. A turning point arrived in mid-November, when a confidential deposition unearthed admissions that defied previous denials. Testimony from a former assistant corroborated the extent of financial manipulations and deliberate obstructions of my recovery efforts. These admissions struck at the heart of their defense, catalyzing accelerated efforts toward resolution. During this turbulent period, I carefully maintained my public image and personal well-being. Frequent meetings with medical professionals ensured that my recovery remained on course, countering attempts by the opposition to cast doubt on my capacity. The physical renewal reasserted my authority, not just legally, but within the eyes of family and community. As December approached, our legal team prepared for decisive proceedings to finalize asset restitutions and permanently bar Emily, Michael, and Robert from fiduciary capacities. Every step was orchestrated to withstand appeal and future contestation. Despite the harshness of consequences, I took deliberate measures to uphold a sense of dignity and order. Part of my strategy included drafting clear protocols for future family interactions and financial management, mechanisms designed to prevent recurrence of such betrayal. In my mind, the restoration of trust was as important as recovery of assets. By year's end, the long battle culminated in a verdict that resoundingly favored my claims. Judicial rulings restored ownership and control over primary properties, financial reserves, and legal documents, sealing the triumph of methodical planning and unwavering resolve over deception and greed. The aftermath was a family forever changed. Relationships once warm were now strained beyond repair. However, the restoration of justice and authority enabled me to establish a new order, one rooted in transparency, respect, and clear boundaries. Reflecting on this arduous journey, I recognize the transformation within myself. The once unsuspecting father became a tactical leader, guiding with patience, intelligence, and unwavering composure. This metamorphosis was not born of vengeance but of necessity, a commitment to safeguard everything built against destruction. Though scars remain, satisfaction arises from the equitable outcome attained through deliberate action. Justice was neither swift nor without cost, but it was earned through persistence and rigor. The intimate betrayals of this chapter taught harsh lessons about trust, vigilance, and the power of resilience. They also underscored the importance of building alliances grounded in authenticity and mutual respect. As I prepare for the future, the lessons learned engrave themselves deeply. Family may fracture, but strength, clarity, and purpose can rebuild foundations stronger than before. The painful truths uncovered have set the stage for renewal, ensuring that control, dignity, and legacy endure beyond the shadow of betrayal. This story is not simply one of loss or recovery, but of transformation, a testament to the courage required to reclaim justice within the labyrinth of family and fortune. The day I stood in the courtroom to hear the final ruling was unlike any before, heavy with the weight of years of silent planning, disappointment, and cautious hope. The months-long battle had worn away the illusion of a united family, exposing raw fractures that no amount of time could fully heal. Yet, from this devastation, I faced the solemn task of reclaiming my place and securing a new foundation for what remained. The judge's voice was steady, deliberate as she laid out her decision. Full restitution of my assets, permanent removal of Emily Johnson, Michael Davis, and Robert Johnson from any fiduciary role, and legal mandates to prevent future unauthorized access. The verdict was comprehensive, an acknowledgement not only of the calculated betrayals, but of my resolute determination and meticulously documented case. The courtroom remained silent for a moment as the weight of justice settled. I felt an odd mixture of relief and sorrow. The victory was absolute, but the collateral damage was beyond measure. Bonds once cherished lay broken. Yet, the time for rueful lament was brief. This ruling was not a conclusion, but a new beginning. In the days that followed, I took steps to re-establish full control over all family holdings, real estate, investment accounts, trusts, and secured new oversight with trusted advisors dedicated to transparency and integrity. A detailed framework was instituted to govern financial decisions, ensuring future generations could never again exploit familial goodwill for personal gain. The legal consequences for Emily, Michael, and Robert were far-reaching. Lawsuits, repayments, and restrictions imposed by the court left them with diminished influence and no legal standing over family affairs. Their attempts to subvert authority were exposed publicly, restoring my reputation among relatives and community alike. Privately, I reflected on the long journey it had taken, a process marked not by impulsive outbursts but by calculated moves, steady patience, and precise execution. I chose deliberately to avoid destructive retaliation in favor of legal and financial mechanisms that guaranteed lasting control and deterrence. This transformation from a disregarded father to a commanding patriarch controlling his legacy was hard-earned. The traumatic experiences hardened my resolve, but also deepened my understanding of power, trust, and justice. I considered the fractured family dynamics with sober clarity. Bridges burnt by greed and deceit would require years, if ever, to mend. Forgiveness was not on offer lightly, reserved only for those who genuinely earned it through accountability, which I did not extend easily. Instead, I focused on the future, establishing clear boundaries and governance structures, strengthening protections so neither age nor vulnerability could be exploited again. This was the legacy I vowed to build not just in wealth, but in unwavering stability. Those who stood by me, Helen, Daniel, Jacob, and Margaret, remained integral to the new order. Their loyalty and wisdom proved indispensable, reminding me that true alliances withstand even the harshest trials. I also reassessed my relationship with my remaining children and extended family. While cautious, I took measured steps to re-engage on my own terms, prioritizing dignity and respect over fleeting reconciliation. As the dust settled, a profound sense of satisfaction emerged. A quiet, unshakable acknowledgement that justice, painstakingly pursued and strategically executed, had prevailed. The journey was arduous. No shortcuts led here, no luck or sentimentality afforded protection. Only deliberate intelligence, measured action, and unwavering commitment carved the path forward. Now, in control once more, I face the future fortified by hard lessons and fortified boundaries. The scars of betrayal remain as reminders but do not define me. I have reclaimed my legacy not through fury, but through unrelenting clarity and resolve. This story, once shadowed by family's collapse, closes with the establishment of a new order, one where justice governs, power is respectfully held, and trust is cautiously earned. And in this new chapter, I am firmly the architect of my fate, guardian of a legacy strengthened by truth, endurance, and justice earned. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.